Welcome, dear viewer, to another quiet night in the Hall of Forgotten Time. Tonight, we turn the ancient pages of a world unseen, a world that dreamed beneath the stars long before Columbus ever set sail. Here, the rivers still whisper old songs, and the forests still remember the steps of vanished peoples. You need only close your eyes and listen. This is Go to Sleep, Historian, where history drifts like a lullaby, and stories are told not to stir the mind, but to ease it gently toward rest. So, find your quiet place, breathe slowly, and let us begin our journey into forgotten America, a land of peace, prayer, and time. Before the dawn, a silent continent beneath the stars, before ships crossed the western seas, before sails were raised in the name of kings, there lay a world vast and silent beneath the turning stars, a world that had known neither parchment nor plow, yet carried the deep hum of time in its rivers, its forests, and its wind. This is that world of the ancient Americas, as they were before the noise of discovery, when silence itself held the shape of civilizations. The story begins not in the moment of discovery, but in the long quiet before it. Imagine, dear listener, a night sky unbroken by lamp or smoke. The stars burn cold and clear above endless wilderness from the frozen northern coasts, where the aurora dances like green silk in the heavens, to the humid jungles far to the south, where frogs croak in the dark and the air smells of rain and fruit. No borders, no maps, only the land wide, breathing, alive. Mountains rise like sleeping gods, cloaked in mist. Rivers twist across the plains like silver serpents. Forests whisper to the wind, and somewhere in the distance, the faint crackle of a fire. The first people of this land, gathered in a circle, telling stories that have no beginning and no end. Long before the first sails crested the horizon, long before the name America was ever spoken, life here had already been ancient. Civilizations rose and fell as quietly as tides. Peoples hunted, planted, dreamed, and died. Not in the shadow of empires, but beneath the vast dome of the sky. Each dawn came softly, each dusk fell like a sigh. If one could stand at the edge of time and look down upon the continent, one would see a patchwork of life so intricate, so different, that even silence itself would seem to hum with stories. In the north, tundra and ice. In the south, rainforests that steamed like cauldrons. Between them, 1,000 landscapes stitched together by wind and memory. It began long, long ago, before stone was carved, before words were written. The land was not empty. It was waiting, somewhere far across a frozen bridge of earth. What we now call Beringia, came the first wanderers. They followed the herds, the seasons, and perhaps something older still, the instinct that drives all life to move toward the unknown. They came not in armies, but in families. Children on their mothers' backs, hunters with spears carved from bone, elders walking behind the firelight. Step by step, they entered a new world, a world vast beyond measure, where no path yet had a name. Seasons passed. The glaciers retreated, forests crept northward, and rivers carved new songs through the earth. The people followed southward and eastward, until the continent itself became their home. They learned the speech of the rivers and the wisdom of the wind. They knew when the salmon would rise, when the corn would sprout, when the deer would pass through the misted valleys. Their knowledge was not written, but remembered, carried in stories, in dances, in the painted lines of pottery and the carved faces of wooden totems. In their silence, there was great knowing. The world they built was not the same everywhere. In the north, the hunters watched the aurora dance and followed herds across frozen seas. In the heartlands, where the rivers met, they began to plant small gardens of maize, beans, and squash, the holy trio of the soil. And far to the south, amid steaming jungles, rose the first temples of stone, built to honor gods that moved with the stars. Though they did not yet know one another, their spirits were bound by the same rhythm, the rhythm of seasons, the long breath of the earth. When the moon was full, they told stories of how the world began. Some said it was woven by a spider who sang in darkness. Others said it was born from the dream of a jaguar, or carried upon the back of a turtle swimming through the stars. In every tale there was wonder, and in every wonder a kind of peace. Their world was complete. It did not wait to be found, for it was never lost. And so the centuries passed. Villages grew into towns. Mounds of earth rose, where the dead were buried, and where the living came to honor them. Paths turned into trade routes, threads of connection stretching from ocean to ocean. Copper from the Great Lakes found its way to the Gulf. Feathers from the tropics drifted northward into icy lands. The continent breathed as one body, vast, silent, dreaming. If one could walk across it then, from the Arctic to the Andes, one would find no wilderness, but 1,000 homes. Each forest was known, each river named, each mountain told of in song. Every field had a watcher, every storm a meaning. The people lived close to the pulse of the earth, not above it, not apart from it. To them, time was not a straight path, but a circle that turned with the sun, the moon, and the heartbeat of the seasons. And yet, though they lived in harmony, their lives were not without struggle. Famine came, and flood, and fire. Tribes clashed for hunting grounds, or for honor. But still, they endured not with empires and iron, but with patience, with the wisdom of long memory. Each generation learned the same truth, that the land gives, and the land takes away, and that to live is to walk lightly upon the earth. To the east, waves broke endlessly upon unseen shores. Across that ocean, another world existed, one crowded with castles, kings, and endless wars. But the people here knew nothing of it. Their eyes were on the moon, not the horizon. Their maps were drawn in stars, not in parchment. Their histories were sung, not written. And so, in this vast and quiet world, time moved differently, slower, deeper, more like dreaming than waking. The night deepens now, and the storyteller's candle burns low. He pauses and listens to the wind outside the wooden door. For a moment it sounds like the echo of distant drums, faint, rhythmic, ancient. The land remembers it always does, and those centuries will pass, and strangers will one day arrive with iron and fire. The memory of that first quiet continent, unbroken, untamed, will remain in the stillness of that first world, before names and flags and borders. There was only the whisper of the grass, the shimmer of the rivers, and the endless, watching stars. A continent, a peace, asleep beneath the sky. The ancient paths and the peoples of the dawn, the first footsteps upon this land, did not thunder nor echo. They whispered, long before cities, before stone, before memory itself. They came small groups wandering across the great bridge of ice and earth that once joined Asia. Through the Americas, the world was colder then. Wind swept across white plains, and the sea lay trapped beneath mountains of frozen light. These wanderers did not know they were crossing between worlds. They followed the herds, mammoth and muskox, caribou and bison, following life wherever it led. Their feet pressed softly into snow and sand, and behind them stretched a trail not of conquest, but of survival. Each campfire they built was the beginning of a story, and each sunrise they greeted was a quiet promise that life would continue. As the ages passed, the bridge of earth disappeared beneath the sea once more, leaving those wanderers alone upon a continent vast and unknown. Yet they did not mourn. They looked ahead to the forests, the plains, the mountains, and the rivers that sang in the distance. Children were born who had never seen the lands their ancestors left behind. For them, this new world was not strange. It was home. And so the people of the dawn began their long journey southward, eastward, outward, their lives spreading like ripples on still water. In the north, they found endless ice and the roar of glaciers breaking in the sun. They learned to build homes from snow and bone, to fish through frozen seas, and to travel with dogs across the shining white. In the great forests that spread below, they became hunters and gatherers, following the deer through the birch groves, learning the language of trees, which bark healed fever, which root could cure hunger. And farther south, where the cold gave way to warmth, they discovered new fruits, new rivers, new ways to live. Here, in the fertile valleys, seeds took root. The first hands pressed soil, and the first gardens were born. These early gardens were small, tiny squares of hope beside a hut or a stream. Corn, beans, and squash. The three sisters, as they would come to be called. They grew together, each giving to the others, the corn standing tall, the beans climbing its stalk, the squash spreading across the ground to keep the soil moist and the weeds away. From this humble trinity would rise entire worlds of culture and story. For the first time, people could stay in one place. Villages were built of mud, red, and thatch. Fires burned in the same hearths for generations. The earth, once a passing companion, became family. At night, they gathered around the flames. Elders spoke of how the first people had emerged from caves or from the breath of the sky. Children learned to shape flint and bone, to wear bonnets, to carve totems. Their stories did not speak of empires or kings, but of balance, of how to live gently with the world that fed them. Each river had a guardian spirit. Each mountain had a heart. Each hunt was a prayer whispered to the creature taken. It was a world where everything breathed together, where even the stones were thought to dream. The centuries flowed on, and the land shaped the people as much as they shaped the land. Those who lived by the sea became fishers and sailors, crafting canoes that cut through fog and tide. Those who roamed the plains became hunters of great beasts. First, mammoth and mastodon, then the swift bison that thundered across the grasses. And in the forests, the people learned the art of the seasons. When to harvest berries, when to trap beaver, when to move before the snows. In every direction, life adapted. Quietly, beautifully, endlessly. They left little that time could easily keep. No marble, no iron, no written words. But beneath the soil, their traces remain. Flint points shaped by patient hands, bones charred by ancient fires, the faint outline of a hearth buried under centuries of wind. To modern eyes, it may seem simple, but to them, each tool, each fire, was a miracle, the promise of another day. The story of endurance itself. As more generations passed, the people spread farther still, through narrow mountain paths and over roaring rivers, down into the great basin deserts, and even beyond the equator, to the jungles of the south. Everywhere they went, they carried the memory of where they had come from. The stars above, the fire beside them, the stories that gave shape to their world. Wherever they stopped, they found new ways to live. They hunted and fished, farmed and traded. They learned the ways of stone and clay, of weaving and pottery, of ceremony and dream. And with time came variety, the birth of countless nations and tribes, each with its own tongue, its own gods, its own rhythm. In the east, along river valleys, people gathered into settled lives. Into plains, others followed the herds, carrying their homes with them, portable worlds of hide and wood. In the far north, life was carved from ice. In the far south, from sun and green. From this quiet diversity grew a vast mosaic of humanity, unseen by the rest of the world, yet no less grand. Each group held its own creation story, its own sense of belonging. Some believed that they had risen from the earth itself, children of clay, shaped by divine breath. Others said they had descended from the stars or emerged from sacred caves. These were not myths of conquest, but of connection, of harmony between flesh and forest, sky and soul. And so, through story and ritual, they wove themselves into the land until there was no boundary between the two. The people were the land. The land was the people. If we could walk among them now, in that time of beginnings, we would see no great cities, no kings upon thrones, but we would see something older and perhaps wiser. Families gathering roots by moonlight, hunters offering prayers to the deer they must take, children laughing beside streams where their ancestors once crossed. There was struggle, yes, but there was also peace, a rhythm older than civilization itself. The world around them was full of sound, the cries of cranes, the whisper of grass, the murmur of rivers. Yet their world was also filled with silence, a silence that was not emptiness, but presence. It was the silence of belonging, of being in tune with everything that lived and breathed. In that silence, the first songs were sung. They were not songs of conquest or triumph, but of gratitude for the warmth of the fire, for the hunt well met, for the endless turning of the seasons. Slowly, over thousands of years, these songs would grow into cultures, into languages and traditions, into trade routes and alliances. Each step would draw them closer to what we might one day call civilization. But for now, in the deep dawn of their story, they were still wanderers, still children of the Great Migration, still bound to the wind. They did not yet know of Cahokia or the Mayan temples that would rise. Those were still far in the future, waiting in the womb of time. For now, there was only the journey, the campfire, and the stars. One might imagine a single traveler, walking through that ancient world, across frozen tundra, through forests and deserts, over mountains. He sees no walls, no flags, no boundaries, only life in all its quiet forms. Hunters sharing meat, women grinding seeds, children playing in dust, old ones watching the sunset with eyes full of memory. Everywhere he goes, the air smells of smoke and earth. Everywhere, the people smile with the simple knowledge that they belong. He does not know it, but he walks through the first chapters of a vast, unrecorded epic. The storyteller pauses. The fire before him burns low, and sparks drift into the night like small stars. He speaks softly now, almost a whisper. "These were the peoples of the dawn," he says. "They were the first to call this place home, the first to look upon the land and give it meaning. They were not lost tribes of forgotten empires. They were the heart of a world complete in itself." He lifts his gaze toward the night sky, where countless stars shimmer above the horizon. "They walked beneath the same heavens we see now," he murmurs. But their silence was deeper, their knowing more patient. The candlelight flickers. The tale continues. For in the next age, these wanderers would cease to wander. They would build homes of earth and would raise mounds to honor their dead and call to the spirits that watched from beyond the rivers. Their paths would become villages, their fires would become cities, and their silence, the silence of the dawn, would give way to the hum of civilization. But that is a story for another night. The dawn years faded like mist over still water, and a new age came quietly upon the land. The people no longer roamed as they once had. Their feet had grown roots. Their hearts had learned to stay. Where the great rivers met, where forests opened into meadows, villages began to rise, circles of dwellings, gardens of maize and beans, smoke curling upward into patient skies. And from the hum of daily life, something new was born, a memory that wished to take form, a wish to remember, a wish to be remembered. The first mounds began as small hills of earth, humble offerings to the spirits. A family might pile soil over the resting place of a loved one, pressing it down with care, singing softly as they worked. Others, seeing the shape upon the land, added to it each handful of soil a prayer, each layer a gesture of love. Over generations, the mounds grew from graves to monuments, from monuments to mountains. And so began the age of the mound builders. Across what we now call the heart of North America, a quiet transformation unfolded. In the valleys of the Ohio, along the waters of the Mississippi, through the rolling lands that stretched from the Great Lakes to the Gulf, the earth began to change shape under human hands. No stone, no iron, only patience and time. Thousands of baskets of soil, carried by countless hands, day after day, year after year. And from that, labor rose gentle hills, curved and solemn, like the backs of sleeping giants. These were not palaces, nor fortresses. They were places of reverence, bridges between earth and sky. Some held the bones of ancestors, carefully wrapped in woven cloth. Others were shaped into sacred forms, circles, serpents, birds, and stars. Some marked the passing of the sun and moon, aligning perfectly with solstice light. The land itself became a calendar, a temple, and a story, written not in ink, but in soil. The people who built them, the Adena, the Hopewell, and later, the Mississippians. lived lives woven with ceremony. Their days moved in rhythm with the heavens. Each season brought its duties: planting, harvest, feasting, mourning, renewal. To them, time was not a march forward, but a circle that turned forever. Life and death were not ends, but crossings the way a river passes beneath mist, unseen for a moment, only to reappear downstream. In the evenings, when the day's work was done, the villages glowed with firelight. The smell of roasted corn drifted through the air. Children listened as elders spoke of the spirits who guided their ancestors, the great serpent who guarded the earth, the sky people who watched the stars, the gentle grandmother moon who marked the months. Their stories were not told for wonder alone. They were lessons, gentle reminders of harmony, of duty, of the invisible threads that bound all things together. Trade routes began to form, long, winding paths through forests and plain. From the Great Lakes came copper, shaped into tools and ornaments that gleamed like red sunlight. From the south came seashells and mica, glimmering with the memory of distant waters. And along these routes moved not just goods, but ideas, new customs, new songs, new ways to honor the earth. The mound-building world was not one nation, but many hundreds of small societies, connected like beads upon a thread. Each village knew its neighbors, and through ceremony, they shared in one great spiritual breath. Archaeologists would one day name these cultures by what they left behind, the shapes of their mounds, the pottery buried beside their dead. But to the people themselves, there were no such names. They were simply the people, and this was simply the world. To live well was to live in balance, to plant and to give thanks, to hunt and to pray, to die and to be remembered in the arms of the earth. The mounds themselves seemed to breathe with life. At sunrise, shadows stretched across them like waves. At dusk, the last light clung to their edges, before sinking into night. Some were shaped like vast serpents winding across ridges, their eyes aligned with the stars, their tails curling toward the horizon. Others formed great circles and squares, places where the people gathered to dance, to feast, to speak to their gods. The earth had become sacred architecture, quiet, enduring, patient. For many centuries, this world endured peaceful, ordered, guided by the rhythm of rivers. Then, slowly, the heart of this world began to beat faster. Villages grew into towns. Leaders rose, not kings in the way of Europe, but respected keepers of balance, mediators between people and spirits. Ceremonies grew more complex. Fields widened, feeding many, and upon the banks of the Mississippi, a new kind of settlement began to rise, one that would outshine all others. It would be called Cahokia, the city of the sun. But that is for another chapter. Here, in this one, we still walk among the smaller mounds, the quieter worlds, where the soil remembers and the trees still whisper over forgotten graves. Imagine walking through one of these villages on a summer afternoon. The air is warm and full of insects. Children chase one another between the houses. Smoke drifts upward from cooking fires. Somewhere, a drum begins to beat, slow, steady, like the pulse of the land. Nearby, men and women carry baskets of earth to a low rise by the river. They sing as they work, each note blending with the sound of wind and water. They are building not for themselves, but for those who will come after, for their children, for their ancestors, for the spirits who live between worlds. To watch them as to see patience made visible. At night, the stars reflect upon the river's surface. Those same stars are marked in the alignments of their earthworks, precise as any temple of Egypt or shrine of Greece. But they are not built to rule the heavens. They are built to remember them. Each mound points toward a moment. The rising of the solstice sun, the appearance of a certain star, the turning of the moon. In this way, the people mapped eternity with Earth itself. The storyteller leans closer to the flame. He runs a hand over a drawing, a serpent coiled upon a page. Some say these people built their mounds for the dead, he murmurs. But perhaps it is the living they were trying to speak to. Perhaps each mound was a word in a language the land itself understood. He looks up, eyes reflecting the firelight. "Listen long enough," he says, and the ground still whispers. Centuries turned. The Adena gave way to the Hopewell, and the Hopewell to others. Their ways changed, their gods shifted, but the rhythm endured. Build, honor, remember, rebuild. When one mound was complete, another began. When one village fell, another rose nearby. The continuity of spirit was never broken, even as the world around them shifted like river silt. Some mounds were vast ceremonial centers. Others, humble graves for a single soul, but each carried the same meaning, that life was more than what could be seen, that memory was a sacred act. In the old world across the sea, men built cathedrals of stone. Here, they built cathedrals of earth, and though wind and rain would one day wear them down, their spirit remained soft, rounded, and eternal. Toward the end of this age, the Mississippi Valley shimmered with life. Villages lined the riverbanks like beads upon a thread. Canoes moved along the waters, carrying goods, stories, and greetings. Drums echoed across open fields. Abobe, Ito, the mounds watched. Silent guardians of generations. And though the builders themselves would one day vanish, their works endured, patient beneath grass and time. The narrator's tone softens, barely above a whisper. In the heart of the continent, he says, the earth still remembers their touch. Stand upon one of their mounds, and you can feel the warmth of all who came before. Listen, and you might hear the murmur of the rivers that once carried their songs. He lets the silence settle. Outside, a breeze stirs the trees, the faint echo of that ancient wind. The mounds rise still, green and rounded, gentle upon the land. They ask for nothing. They offer quiet. They remind us that memory need not be loud to last. And in that silence, the world of the mound builders sleeps on, wrapped in grass, crowned with stars, waiting for dawn. The city of the sun. Cahokia's forgotten majesty, the rivers meet beneath a wide and hazy sky. There, where the Mississippi and the Missouri join hands, a city once rose from the soil like a slow-growing dream. It had no marble, no iron, no written scrolls to proclaim its name. And yet it was vast, shimmering, alive. We call it Cahokia. Now, though those who built it spoke other words, words that drifted away like smoke when their fires went cold. It was the beating heart of the mound-building world, a city born of faith, harvest, and celestial rhythm. When the sun climbed over the eastern horizon, it touched hundreds of mounds and wooden posts arranged in perfect order. Each shadow, each angle, each path of light had meaning. The city itself was a calendar, a temple, and a prayer made of earth. At its center rose the great mound monks, mound, as later travelers would call it, a vast terrace of packed soil, rising 10 stories high, broad enough to hold a temple the size of a castle. From its summit, one could see the river glinting in the distance, and hear the murmur of thousands of voices below, farmers, potters, weavers, children, laughing among the cornfields. Cahokia's people numbered more than the cities of London or Paris in their own time. Some 40,000 souls lived within its fields and palisades. They came from far valleys and distant rivers, drawn by trade, by ceremony, by the rumor of something sacred. Canoes glided along the waterways, heavy with corn, shells, copper, and dreams. At dawn, smoke lifted from 1,000 hearths. At dusk, drums answered one another across the fields. The air itself seemed to breathe with purpose. The storyteller's voice lowers. To walk there, he murmurs, was to walk inside the breath of the earth. The streets were wide, lined with houses of thatch and wood. Each neighborhood had its plaza, its central fire, its mound where ancestors slept, and above them all, the priests kept watch, keepers of the calendar, observers of the heavens. They studied the rising of Venus, the tilt of the solstice sun, the slow wander of the moon across seasons. From these movements, they drew meaning: when to plant, when to call the people together to dance and renew the bond between earth and sky. The grand ceremonies filled the plazas like tides. People painted their faces with ochre and soot. Feathers rustled, Flutist Sigurd rattles whispered in rhythm. The smell of roasted maize mingled with that of sweet grass and cedar smoke. And when the priests lifted their hands toward the sun, the crowd fell silent, thousands breathing as one. No written word survives to tell us what was spoken, but the earth remembers the order, the posts set in perfect circles, the alignments marking the sunrise at midsummer, and the fading light of winter's end. Those circles we now call wood hinges, though to the people of Cahokia, they were far more than wood in geometry. They were instruments for listening to time itself. Beyond the central city stretched fields of maize that glowed gold beneath the sun. Rivers shimmered like serpents through the green. Small villages dotted the outer lands, each owing part of its harvest to the city at the heart. In return came goods, stories, protection, and the blessing of the Sun Temple. Trade flowed outward like blood from a living heart. North for copper, south for shells and feathers, east for mica and stone, west for pigments and salt. From the Gulf Coast to the Great Lakes, the name of Cahokia carried weight. It was more than a place. It was a promise of order, a beacon of faith. At night, the fires upon the mounds burned like constellations upon the earth, mirroring the heavens above. Perhaps that was their purpose, to make the land itself a reflection of the sky, to draw the gods downward into familiar patterns. In those quiet hours, one could imagine the priests upon the high mound, their robes stirring in the breeze, their faces lit by starlight as they whispered the old prayers. The city did not stand alone. Across the valleys were smaller towns, trading outposts, ceremonial sites, the satellites of a grand design. Each kept the same rhythm. Each followed the same celestial drumbeat. Together, they formed a web of culture that stretched across half a continent. For nearly 2 centuries, the world of Cahokia thrived, its fields fertile, its people numerous, its ceremonies unbroken. The mounds multiplied until they numbered over 100. The great plaza could hold tens of thousands, and the wooden palisade surrounding the sacred precinct rose higher than a man's head. All this built with nothing but soil and will. The storyteller pauses. A faint sound of wind moves through tall grass. And yet, even the brightest flame burns itself to ash. The story of Cahokia is not one of conquest, but of slow fading of years slipping quietly into dust. Why it happened, no one can say. Perhaps the rivers changed their course. Perhaps the harvests failed. Perhaps the people grew weary of priests and ceremony. Whatever the reason, the drums fell silent. The plazas emptied. The weeds returned. The sun that once gilded the mounds began to set. The city still breathed, but the rhythm had changed. Where once there was song, now there was silence between the drumbeats. Where once the air shimmered with life, now it hung heavy with stillness. Perhaps it began with the fields. Too many mouths, too few rains. The same rich earth that had raised Cahokia's temples began to tire, its strength drained by endless seasons of maize. Rivers that once blessed the fields may have turned against them, their floods too fierce, their droughts too cruel. The storytellers whispered of omens, stars misaligned, strange lights over the hills, sickness among the young. But the priests spoke softly of patience, of the eternal turning of the seasons, that even the sun must sleep before it rises again. Still, the people began to drift away. Families followed the rivers to quieter lands, seeking new soil, new hope. The plazas grew empty, the markets fell silent, and the mounds stood like watchful giants over a city forgetting itself. Grass crept up the stairways, the walls weathered. The sacred posts of the wood hinge fell and rotted where they lay. But even as time reclaimed the place, there were those who still climbed the mounds at dawn to greet the rising sun, to whisper to the wind the old words of gratitude. They kept the memory alive for a while longer, until even they too were gone. And so Cahokia returned to the soil from which it had come, its temples flattened, its plazas swallowed by the green breath of summer. For centuries, the land forgot. The forests grew thick. Once more the deer and foxes wandered where children once played. Travelers who came later found only strange hills, rounded and silent, covered in grass. They thought them the work of nature, until one day someone dug into the earth and found pottery, tools, and bones. The truth began to whisper again. This was a city. These were people. This was a world. The storyteller's voice grows even softer, as if speaking to one already half asleep. The story of Cahokia is not one of tragedy. It is not a fall, but of fading the way the sun sinks each night into the west. Not to die, but to rest. The mounds still stand, and in their shape we see the outline of an ancient dream. That humanity, even without iron or kings, can build wonders simply by listening to the earth, to the sky, and to the quiet pulse of life. In the hush of evening, imagine yourself standing atop the great mound. The wind smells of river clay and sweet grass. Far below, the plain stretches to the horizon, gold with the stubble of last season's maize. The city is gone, but the air still holds a strange calm, as if it remembers the murmur of 1,000 souls. You can almost hear them, faint as the rustle of reeds, the sound of children playing in the plaza, of women grinding corn, of the low chant of priests greeting the dawn. It lingers there, somewhere between the worlds of sound and silence. The historian's tone tones reflective, almost prayerful. Cahokia reminds us that greatness need not shout, that power can be measured not by stone or steel, but by harmony, by how gently people fit within the breath of their land. For centuries before any ship crossed from Europe, this city had risen, flourished, and passed away, its memory buried beneath the grass. But in that silence lies peace. A long pause, the crackle of a fire, the faint call of an owl. Now, the night has fully come. The stars hang over the mounds, as they did 1,000 years ago. Each glimmer is a memory, each breath of wind a voice returned from the old world. The storyteller closes his book, and thus ends the tale of Cahokia, the city of the sun, whose people dreamed with the stars, built with the earth, and vanished into the quiet embrace of time. The desert dreamers and the cliff kingdoms far from the wide rivers of Cahokia, where forests thicken and waters weave. There lies another world, one of sun, silence, and unending stone. The storyteller turns the page, and the map of the land changes color. The blue of rivers fades into red earth, and the soft hum of insects becomes the whisper of wind between cliffs. Here is the Southwest, the realm of mesas, canyons, and sky. A land that drinks sunlight and gives back only stillness. At first glance, it seems empty, a desert meant only for lizards and ghosts. But listen closely. Beneath the quiet, there is rhythm. The old breath of the ancestral Pueblones, the Onosazi, as some once called them, still moves through the stones. Long before the first European dreamt of crossing the ocean, these desert dwellers carved entire kingdoms from cliffs. They learned the patience of stone, the art of coaxing life from the dry earth, and the wisdom of harmony with things that do not speak. The wind, the sky, the sand. Their homes were not built upon the ground, but in it hidden, suspended, or carved deep into canyon walls. They lived where shadows moved with the sun, where a single spring of water could mean the difference between life and forgetting. Imagine, dear listener, a sun rising over the red cliffs of Mesa Verde. The rock faces glow like embers, and in the hollows beneath them lie small cities, perfectly shaped rooms of stone and timber, each doorway framed to catch both light and wind. Below, the canyon floor is quiet, a ribbon of green winding through the red and gold. Within the cliff dwellings, life awakens softly. A mother grinds corn upon a flat stone, her rhythmic strokes echoing faintly through the chambers. A child stirs the fire. Farther down, men prepare to climb ladders made of wood and fiber, their feet finding the same holds their ancestors carved generations ago. Smoke rises slowly from the openings. It mingles with the pale morning mist, and the smell of roasting maize curls upward into the cold dawn air. The storyteller's tone is reverent, unhurried, as if he too stands among those cliffs, watching a world built upon patience. These people were not wanderers of the sand. They were architects of balance. In their world, every action was a conversation with nature. They built their homes facing the sun to catch its winter warmth, and shaped their walls to cool the summer heat. Their pots, painted with spirals, and feathers, carried not just grain but story patterns that spoke of clouds, of rain, of the endless turning of the seasons. Their prayers were painted in earth tones, ochres, blacks, whites, echoing the desert that cradled them. At the center of each settlement lay the kiva, a round, sunken room where people gathered to speak with the unseen. Here, in flickering firelight, they told the stories of creation. How the people had once lived beneath the earth and climbed into the world above. How each breath was borrowed from the gods of wind and sky. They danced not for spectacle, but for survival. Each step a plea for rain. Each drumbeat a reminder that the land listened. Over time, their knowledge grew deep. They learned the language of stars, marking solstice and equinox, with shafts of light that pierced small windows in the stone. They mapped time upon the canyon walls, their petroglyphs tracing the cycles of the moon and sun. And as centuries passed, their villages multiplied from Chaco Canyon to Mesa Verde, from the cliffs of Quetzal to the high mesas of Acuma. Each was a jewel of the desert, shimmering quietly beneath the watchful eye of the sun. In the heart of this desert empire stood Chaco Canyon, a city like none other, built with such order and precision that even the silence seemed measured. Massive houses rose for stories high, their walls made of sandstone, their beams of pine carried from distant mountains. At night, fires glowed through narrow doorways, and the great plazas, filled with the hum of flute and drum. Roads stretched out from Chaco in straight lines, cutting through desert and mesa, as if drawn by the hands of gods rather than men. No beasts of burden walked these paths. No wheels turned upon them, and yet they reached for miles, binding together a world of scattered villages into one great harmony. The people of the cliffs were not alone in their wisdom. Their neighbors, the Hohokam and the Mogollon, shared the desert and its lessons. The Hohokam, in what is now Arizona, became masters of water, weaving canals across the dry land like threads of silver. They turned desert into garden, and the whisper of irrigation channels became their music. The Mogollon carved their homes along river valleys, their pottery decorated with fine, swirling lines, each vessel a silent hymn to the earth that sustained them. Together, these desert dreamers built a civilization not of conquest, but of endurance. They thrived where others might wither, their culture shaped by patience and by the slow kindness of the sun. But as the centuries passed, the desert began to change. The rains grew fickle. The winds came earlier and stayed longer. Rivers shrank into memory, and the green ribbons that once crossed the canyons turned brown and silent. Crops failed. The drums and the kivas beat slower. The stars above, once guides of time and faith, seemed colder, more distant. The people of Chaco began to leave their grand houses. The roads that had bound the desert world together grew empty, their stones half buried by drifting sand. In the cliffs of Mesa Verde, the last families stayed longest, watching the horizon each morning for clouds that never came. They gathered what they could carry, sealed the doorways behind them, and walked away. No war took them. No army conquered their world. They left as they had lived quietly, their absence like the fading of a song. Centuries passed. Wind filled the canyons. Owls nested in the abandoned keep. The sun, indifferent as ever, rose and set upon empty dwellings. But the memory of those who built the cliffs never truly died. Their descendants live still among the Pueblos Uni and Hopi peoples. They carried the songs of their ancestors, singing to the same sky, planting corn with the same quiet reverence. For them, the old cities are not ruins. They are sleeping homes, their spirits resting until called again by prayer and story. The voice grows softer still, as if the night deepens around the listener. When you see the cliffs of the southwest and the strange, perfect dwellings tucked into their faces, you might think them silent. But if you listen closely, really listen, you will hear the echo of footfalls on ladders, the faint rhythm of grinding stone, the sigh of wind moving through rooms built for gods and men alike. It is the hum of a world that once knew the value of stillness. The storyteller closes this chapter with a whisper. The desert dreamers are gone, but their wisdom remains, that life, even in the harshest place, is possible when one listens more than one takes, and when one learns to build not against the earth. But with it, the wind outside carries away the last words, and in their place comes the hush of ancient sand shifting in moonlight. The feathered serpent and the stone temples far to the south. Beyond the deserts and mesas of the Pueblo lands, the world changes once more. The soil grows dark and rich, the air heavy with the perfume of rain. Here, the forests are not silent. They sing a slow, eternal chorus of frogs, birds, and dripping leaves. It is the realm of the feathered serpent and of the people who built their dreams from stone and fire. Long before any European sail touched the horizon, these jungles and valleys cradled empires, the Olmec, the Maya, and the Aztec civilizations, whose hearts beat in time with the stars. The storyteller takes a breath, as though the scent of wet earth fills the room. Before the Maya rose, before Tenochtitlan gleamed on its lake, there were the Olmec, the people of the rubber, the first great sculptors of gods. Their world lay along the swamps and rivers of the Gulf Coast, where mist hung low over green waters and the air shimmered with heat. Here, they carved faces from stone so vast and calm that they seemed to belong to another age entirely. The colossal head some 10 feet tall, each a portrait of a forgotten ruler, still rest half buried in the soil, their lips curved in silent thought, their eyes forever watching a world that no longer exists. The Olmec were dreamers of beginnings. They gave the world the earliest calendars, the first glyphs of a written word, and the whisper of gods who would live on for centuries. Serpents with feathers, jaguars with human eyes, and deities who danced between life and death. From their roots grew the Maya, whose kingdoms would rise like emerald towers from the jungles of the Yucatan. To walk among them was to walk in the shadow of time itself. Their cities Tikal, Palenque, Copan, Uxmal were carved not only for men, but for gods. Temples reached toward the sun in perfect alignment with the solstice. Every stair, every wall, every shadow was part of a greater rhythm, a cosmic heartbeat written in stone. At dawn, the jungle would glow with golden light. Monkeys cried from the trees, and the scent of copal resin rose from altars as priests greeted the new day. They wore feathered headdresses that shimmered with quetzal plumes, jade beads that caught the light like drops of the sea. On their bark paper codices, scribes painted the language of stars, glyphs of great beauty and mystery. They wrote of gods who sacrificed themselves to light the sun, of kings who bled for the balance of the cosmos, of time itself counted in endless circles, 260 days, 365 days, 52 years, cycles within cycles, all breathing together. Their world was not linear. It was alive, a spiral turning forever. The storyteller's tone grows hushed, reverent. To the Maya, the heavens were not distant. They were a mirror of the earth. Every star had its twin in the jungle below. Every temple echoed a constellation above. When the priest stood upon the highest platform and raised his arms to the dawn, he was not reaching upward. He was meeting the divine halfway. But even in their glory, the cities of the Maya bore the marks of time's slow hunger. Great temples grew silent. The forests crept inward. Stone kings stared out over plazas now empty except for vines and roots. Some say drought took them. Others say the soil, overuse, turned to dust. Perhaps it was the weight of their own faith, a world wound too tightly around the cycles of gods and stars. Yet, the Maya did not vanish. Their blood, their language, their prayers endure still, and the people who live among those same green hills today, their eyes reflecting the same patient fire. After centuries, as the jungle swallowed the temples, another empire rose farther north, an empire built on myth and precision, on order and devotion, and on the gleaming promise of the gods. This was Tenochtitlan, the heart of the Aztec world. It stood upon a lake and island of causeways and canals, its shining temples mirrored in the still waters. The air there smelled of flowers and fire, of roasted maize and incense. At night, torches lined the bridges, and their reflections turned the lake into a galaxy of flames. The Aztecs, or Mexica, believed themselves chosen by the sun itself. Warriors of light, in an eternal battle against darkness. Every sunrise was a victory. Every sunset a reminder that sacrifice must continue so the world would not fall asleep forever. Their god Huitzilopochtli, the blue hummingbird of the south, demanded offerings to keep the sun alive. It is easy to recoil from this now, but in their eyes, each act was devotion, a payment to ensure that dawn would come again. And so, from the heart of their empire, the great temple rose Templomer, 2 shrines side by side, one to the god of war, one to the god of rain. It stood as a mountain made by human hands, its steps worn smooth by the feet of pilgrims and priests. Around it sprawled markets bursting with life. Merchants selling cacao, turquoise, obsidian blades, bright feathers, and sweet fruits from distant lands. The hum of the city carried over the water like music. Some said it was the most beautiful city on earth. The storyteller pauses, his voice almost lost beneath the sound of imagined rain. But beauty, like all things mortal, was fleeting. When the strangers from across the sea arrived, bearing steel, disease, and the memory of other gods, the great city fell within a generation. The lake drained, the temples were torn down, and the stones that once glowed with fire and prayer were used to build another city upon their bones. Yet even as the dust settled, the spirit of the feathered serpent lived on. For the Aztecs, too, had worshipped him, Quetzalcoatl, the god of knowledge, of wind, of creation, a bridge between worlds. A promise that wisdom can be reborn, even after destruction. And so the jungles slept again. Vines wrapped themselves around fallen temples. Ceiba trees split the steps of pyramids, but beneath the soil, the stories remained of gods with human hearts, and humans who dared to speak to the gods. A pause. The night sounds return. When you close your eyes tonight, imagine the jungles breathing, the stones still warm from ancient sun, and the slow song of priests calling across the centuries. The Maya counted time in great cycles. Perhaps, they would say, nothing truly ends. The world only dreams for a while, and then begins again. The storyteller sets down his quill. Outside, rain begins to fall. It patters softly on the leaves, like fingers tapping upon old stone. The feathered serpent still flies. He whispers, in dreams, in stories, in the breath between thunder and silence. The sages of the Andes, the storyteller opens his worn book again. The candle flickers, its flame bending as if to climb the same invisible stairway. The story now takes upward, ever upward, toward the roof of the world. Here, he whispers. The air grows thin. The earth folds into mountains, and the sky feels close enough to touch. We have left the jungles of the Maya, the shining lakes of Tenochtitlan, and now find ourselves upon the mighty spine of the world, the Andes, where clouds rest upon ridges, and stone remembers more than any book. This was the realm of the sages of the Andes, the builders, the dreamers, the watchers of the sun. Their wisdom rose with the mountains themselves. Long before the great Inca built their empire, others had walked these heights, in narrow valleys where rivers sang through stone, the Chavin-carved temples that hummed with mystery. At Cabindahuantara-deep, in the heart of the mountains, pilgrims journeyed to dark chambers cut from the living rock. There, by torchlight, they heard the echo of water running beneath the floors. The voice of the earth itself. Stone-fanged idols glimmered in the shadows. Half beasts, half their eyes carved to follow the flicker of flame. These early sages knew that power did not shout, it murmured. And so, they built sanctuaries not to be seen, but to be felt. Centuries passed. The Chavin fell silent, and new cultures rose along the long, thin body of the Andes, each inheriting the wisdom of those before them. To the Norse, the Mocha, masters of clay and metal, told their stories in painted vessels, faces of kings, warriors, and spirits shaped by steady hands. Their pyramids of sun-baked bricks still stand beside the desert sea, their walls painted with gods of storm and sea. To the south, the Nazca drew lines so vast that only the heavens could see them spirals. Birds, monkeys, and hands, etched into the desert floor with quiet devotion. No one knows for certain why they did it, but perhaps it was their way of speaking with the sky a message to the gods, written in dust and silence. And still the world turned. Empires rose and faded, until, at last, one people bound them all together. The Inca, children of the sun. Their kingdom, Tawantinsuyu, stretched for thousands of miles, from the coasts of the Pacific to the valleys of the Amazon, from snow-crowned peaks to fertile plains. It was a world held not by conquest alone, but by the rhythm of order and the unseen threads of faith and labor. In the beginning, they said, their first king, Manco Capac, and his sister Mama Oclo, rose from the sacred waters of Lake Titicaca, sent by the sun god Inti to bring light and law to the world. With a golden staff, they wandered until it sank Izalli into the earth, a sign that this was the place to build their home. There they founded Cusco, the navel of the world, the beating heart of the Andes. Cusco was no ordinary city. Its streets formed the shape of a puma, the sacred animal of strength. Its temples were dressed in gold, its walls fitted with stones so precise that no blade could slip between them. When the morning sun rose, it glimmered upon the temple of the sun Coricancia, a sanctuary whose walls were lined with sheets of shining metal. Inside stood images of the gods, and fields of golden corn crafted by artisans to honor the harvest. The storyteller pauses, as though the light of that long-vanished dawn still glows before him. Here, every act was sacred. Each terrace cut into the mountainside was both field and altar. Each stone carried upward was an offering. The Inca did not separate faith from labor. They built with prayer. They farmed with devotion. Their world was woven together like a tapestry of living thread. Without writing, they kept memory in knots of colored cord, the quipu. Each twist a number, each color a meaning, a record of the sun's gifts and the people's work. Messengers called chasqui ran the length of the empire, carrying those cords, their feet flying along the mountain roads. They ran where no horse had ever trod, leaping across valleys and rivers, bringing news from Cusco to the farthest corners of the world. Along their way stood rest houses, and the great stone roads wound through the land like threads of light. Even today, one can walk those paths and feel them hum beneath the feet, as though they still remember the rhythm of those ancient runners. The storyteller breathes softly, and one can almost hear the sound of wind through the terraces. High in the clouds stood Machu Picchu, the hidden city, resting upon a ridge between two mountains, where condors wheel and clouds drift like wandering spirits. Built with precision beyond measure, its stones locked together without mortar, its stairways climbing toward heaven. No wheel touched its stones, no iron cut its shapes, only hands, time, and the patient conversation between Huma and mountain. When dawn breaks there, the first light falls upon the temple of the sun, its window perfectly framed to greet the solstice. It is said that, in those moments, the earth and sky breathe as one. The Inca world was a living harmony. Every valley, every mountain, every river had its spirit, its wak, and the people offered it thanks. To the mountains, coca leaves and chitabia. To the rivers, song. To the sun, the golden harvest of maize. They believed that the world was alive, not as symbol or myth, but as truth. The storyteller smiles faintly. They lived, he murmurs, not above the earth, but within it. And yet, as with all things mortal, time crept close with foreign steps. Strangers came from beyond the horizon, their sails white as snow, their breath heavy with iron and fire. The Inca watched them with wonder, and for a moment, the old balance trembled. Within a single lifetime, the empire of the sun was broken. Cusco fell silent, its gold melted, its temples stripped bare. The quipus, the cords of memory, were cut and cast aside. But mountains do not weep. They endure. Today, in those same high valleys, you may still see farmers tending their terraced fields, their faces weathered, their hands sure. They sow maize and potatoes in the same patterns as their ancestors. They speak Quechua. And when they lift their eyes to the sun, they still whisper the name Inti. The empire may have faded, but its heart continues to beat slowly, quietly in the breath of the wind and the rhythm of footsteps on old stone. The storyteller's voice softens again, as if speaking into twilight. The Andes keep their secrets well. Mist curls over the peaks, the rivers sing their ancient songs, and the stones remember everything. For the sages of these mountains understood something eternal, that all empires fall, but harmony endures, and that wisdom, once rooted in the earth, never dies. He closes the book with a sigh, and for a long moment, nothing moves but the flame of the candle. Then, with the faintest smile, he whispers, "Sleep now, traveler. The mountains still dream, and in their dreams, the sun has never set." The spirits of forest and ice when the world was younger, and the forests of the north still stretched without end. There were no cities of stone here, no golden temples, nor pyramids that caught the sun. Only the long sigh of the wind through cedar and pine, the call of loons on Myristal lakes, and the faint glow of fires burning beneath the trees. This was the domain of the spirits of forest and ice, the quiet peoples of the northern lands, who lived not in conquest, but in companionship with the living earth. They dwelled among rivers that coiled like silver snakes, among lakes so vast they seemed like fragments of the sky fallen to earth. In the winter, the land grew hushed and white, and the people moved with it, gently, like shadows upon snow. They built homes of bark and hide, their smoke curling up into the cold air like offerings. Their world was not ruled by kings or priests, but bee stories, tiles whispered beside fires, passed from elder to childlike, embers handed from palm to palm. Among the great forests of the east lived the Haudenosaunee, whom others would one day call the Iroquois. Their villages rested among tall cornfields and rows of beans, their houses long and shared by many families, woven of sapling and bark, warm in winter, cool in summer. They called themselves the people of the Long House, for they believed the whole world was one great house, with each nation a hearth within it. In their stories, the world began upon the back of a turtle. A sky woman fell from above, carrying seeds of every green thing. The animals below rose to help her, and the muskrat, though smallest and weakest, brought up a handful of mud from the deep. From that small gift, the earth was made, and to this day, the land is called Turtle Island. The storyteller's voice softens, as if tracing those words upon air. They taught that the smallest act, born of kindness, could shape a world. Centuries before any ship touched these shores, the Haudenosaunee forged a peace that would outlast many empires. They gathered beneath a tall tree, the tree of peace, and buried beneath it their weapons, binding themselves by words. Instead of war, their great law of peace spoke of balance, of listening, of choosing leaders, not for power, but for wisdom. It was a law carried in the heart, not written upon parchment. Their council fires burned in a great circle, and the smoke rose upward like prayers to the unseen sky. Further west, beyond the Great Lakes, the Anishinaabe followed the trails of wind and water. They moved with the seasons, fishing, hunting, gathering wild rice in the shallow lakes. To them, each thing in the world had a spirit, a Manitou, the rock, the tree, the bear, the wind. Even the waves that lapped at the canoe's edge were alive and listening. When the thunder rolled across the summer sky, they did not fear it. They said it was the beating of the wings of the mighty thunderbird, guardian of balance and rain. In the high north, where the cold never loosens its grasp, the Inuit shaped a life upon the ice. Theirs was a world of white and silence, where the horizon met the sky in an endless mirror. They built homes of snow, their walls glowing faintly blue beneath the flicker of oil lamps. Their kayaks skimmed across the frozen seas like whispers. They hunted seal and whale, not for sport, but in ceremony with songs of gratitude before and after each hunt. They believed the spirits of animals watched closely and must be treated with respect. For in their world, survival was not a right, but a conversation between human and spirit, between hunger and mercy. Their myths are older than the cold itself. They tell of Sedna, the sea mother, who lives in the dark depths, her hair flowing with fish and seals. When she is angered, the waters freeze and food grows scarce. When she is soothed, she releases her bounty once more. And so the shamans, Tyanga would journey in spirit to comb her hair, to comfort her, and to renew the pact between people and sea. It is a story not of dominion, but of care, a promise whispered between frost and breath. Southward, in the forests that never froze, the Mississippian peoples had long vanished, but the woodlands still held echoes of their mounds, green humps rising from the moss, silent as sleeping gods. The newer tribes, Shawnee, Creek, Cherokee, built lives among those ghosts of earth. They farmed and hunted. They prayed to rivers and stars. Their stories, too, spoke of balance, of walking softly, of remembering that the land does not belong to us, but that we belong to it. The storyteller's voice drifts lower, like snow settling upon pine. In these lands of mist and moonlight, history did not march, it wandered. There were no empires to fall, no monuments to crumble, only the quiet endurance of people who lived with what the earth offered and gave thanks for what it withheld. They left behind no stone palaces, no written records, but they left songs, and their land still hums with them, softly, like the memory of a dream. Listen closely, and perhaps you can hear them now. The crackle of fire, the murmur of elders telling stories while the snow falls outside. Further west, beyond the Great Lakes, the Anishinaabe followed the trails of wind and water. They moved with the seasons, fishing, hunting, gathering wild rice in the shallow lakes. To them, each thing in the world had a spirit. A Manitou, the rock, the tree, the bear, the wind. Even the waves that lapped at the canoe's edge were alive and listening. When the thunder rolled across the summer sky, they did not fear it. They said it was the beating of the wings of the mighty thunderbird, guardian of balance and rain. In the high north, where the cold never loosens its grasp, the Inuit shaped a life upon the ice. Theirs was a world of white and silence, where the horizon met the sky in an endless mirror. They built homes of snow, their walls glowing faintly blue beneath the flicker of oil lamps. Their kayaks skimmed across the frozen seas like whispers. They hunted seal and whale, not for sport, but in ceremony, with songs of gratitude before and after each hunt. They believed the spirits of animals watched closely and must be treated with respect. For in their world, survival was not a right, but a conversation between human and spirit, between hunger and mercy. The storyteller pauses, and you can almost hear the faint hum of wind across a frozen plain. Their myths are older than the cold itself. They tell of Sedna, the sea mother, who lives in the dark depths, her hair flowing with fish and seals. When she is angered, the waters freeze and food grows scarce. When she is soothed, she releases her bounty once more. And so the shamans, the Inca, would journey in spirit to comb her hair, to comfort her, and to renew the pact between people and sea. It is a story not of dominion, but of care, a promise whispered between frost and breath. Southward, in the forests that never froze, the Mississippian peoples had long vanished, but the woodlands still held echoes of their mounds. Green humps rising from the moss, silent as sleeping gods. The newer tribes, Shawnee, Creek, Cherokee, built lives among those ghosts of earth. They farmed and hunted. They prayed to rivers and stars. Their stories, too, spoke of balance, of walking softly, of remembering that the land does not belong to us, but that we belong to it. The storyteller's voice drifts lower, like snow settling upon pine. In these lands of mist and moonlight, history did not march. It wandered. There were no empires to fall, no monuments to crumble, only the quiet endurance of people who lived with what the earth offered and gave thanks for what it withheld. They left behind no stone palaces, no written records, but they left songs, and the land still hums with them, softly, like the memory of a dream. Listen closely, and perhaps you can hear them now. The crackle of fire, the murmur of elders telling stories while the snow falls outside. The dreamers of the plains and sky, there are lands in the heart of the world where the sky never ends, where the earth lies open and unbroken, and the wind tells stories that no man wrote. Before the settlers came, before horses thundered across the prairie. There were people who moved like the seasons, their homes woven of hide and willow, their hearts tuned to the rhythm of the earth. They were the dreamers of the plains and sky-keepers of the open world. Their realm stretched far and wide, from the tallgrass prairies of what is now Kansas and Nebraska, to the rolling hills of the Dakotas, and farther north and south still. Here, the land was a sea of gold and green, rippled by wind, brushed by sunlight. No mountains to guard them, no forests to hide them. Only sky, vast and eternal. To live here was to know the moods of the world itself. The sigh of summer heat, the whisper of autumn frost, the roar of storm and lightning. In this boundless country lived the Pawnee, the Sioux, the Crow, and many others. Each tribe had its own stories, yet all looked to the same sky for meaning. They called it the Great Canopy, the dwelling of spirits, the endless camp of ancestors who had gone ahead. When night fell, they watched the stars wheel slowly above, and every point of light had a story, a song, a name. The Pony said the stars were the council of the gods, each watching over the world below. The Milky Way was the path of spirits, along which souls journeyed after death. The storyteller pauses, and the faint echo of a drum seems to rise, slow and steady, the heartbeat of the land in Tosa days. There were no horses yet. People walked beside the great herds of bison, following their slow migrations. The bison were not merely animals. They were kin. Every part of the creature was used. The hide for shelter, the sinew for bowstrings, the bones for tools and flutes, the flesh for life itself. When they hunted, they prayed first, asking the spirit of the bison for forgiveness and strength, for they believed all beings shared one breath, and to take life was to borrow that breath for a little while. Sometimes, the hunt was done upon cliffs. The people would drive the herds toward a hidden drop, a place later called the Piskin, or Buffalo Jump. When the great beasts fell, their sacrifice was honored with songs and offerings. It was not slaughter. It was ceremony, a gift between species, renewed each season in the endless dance of survival. As generations passed, horses came wild and fierce, descendants of those brought by the far-off strangers from across the sea. But the people of the plains made them their own. The horse became a partner in freedom. It carried them farther than their ancestors had dreamed. It turned the hunt into thunder. It turned war into a dance of grace and courage. Riders painted their horses with sacred patterns. Lightning bolts for speed, handprints for protection. The animal and its rider moved as one, their shadows long across the grass. The storyteller smiles faintly. It was, he murmurs, a symphony of wind and motion, a conversation between man, beast, and sky. In this world without walls, every horizon was a story waiting to be told. The Lakota Sioux spoke of Wakantonka, the great mystery, the unseen power that lived in all things. To them, the universe was one vast circle, no beginning, no end. The earth was a mother, the sky, her eternal companion. To live well was to walk in balance with both. Their ceremonies were not for spectacle, but for remembrance, a way to stay in harmony with the breath of the world. They danced in circles, their feet pounding like rain upon the earth, their eyes lifted to the heavens. Through the smoke and drumbeat, they spoke with the ancestors. When storms rolled in from the west, they did not flee. They stood beneath the flashing clouds, faces turned upward, and welcomed the thunder. For thunder, they said, was the laughter of the sky, enlightening the moment when heaven touched earth. To the Blackfoot, the stars told stories of the old ones who taught the people how to live. They said that in the beginning, humans and animals spoke the same language, but pride divided them, and so they parted, each keeping half the wisdom of the world. The storyteller's tone deepens, almost like a chant. Thus it was said to know the truth. One must listen not only to men, but to the river, the wind, and the cry of the hawk. Across those endless plains, there were sacred places, stone circles marking where the stars met the earth. Some said these were calendars. Others said they were doors. Perhaps they were both. In midsummer, the people gathered in great ceremonies, the sun dance, a prayer of endurance and renewal. They fasted, they sang, they danced until the world itself seemed to move. It was a moment of return, a reminder that life is a circle of giving and receiving, pain and joy, death and rebirth. The plains were not empty, though they seemed endless. They were full of memory, hoofprints, songs, the scent of smoke carried on the air. When the night came, campfires glowed like fallen stars. Children listened wide-eyed as elders told tales of the trickster who taught by mischief, who laughed at pride and foolishness, and reminded all that even gods must sometimes smile. Their laughter echoed across the grass, joining with the coyotes and the wind. Seasons passed, and time flowed like a slow river. Snow buried the land in white silence. Then came spring, and the earth awoke once more, the first shoots rising like prayers from the thawing ground. Life went on, not in rush or conquest, but in rhythm, the rhythm of hooves, rain, and breathing. The storyteller's voice, low as now, almost to a whisper, but even in this vast and sacred world, change would one day come a shadow from the east, riding on strange horses, bearing fire and iron. The old ways trembled. The herds grew fewer, the stars remained the same, but fewer eyes looked up to read them. And yet, not all was lost. For even today, on the windswept plains, the people still sing. They still dance beneath the same wide sky. They still offer tobacco to the dawn and speak to the four directions before every journey. The world remembers those who listen, and the plains remember everything. A pause. Only the sound of the fire and the wind remains. So sleep now, traveler. Close your eyes and drift across that endless grass. Let the wind carry you. Let the stars guide you. As they guided the dreamers of the plains and sky, the land is wide, the night eternal. And somewhere in the distance, a drum still beats slow, steady, like the heartbeat of the earth. The forgotten symphony. The Americas before dawn, the storyteller sits in silence for a moment, his hand resting upon the closed book. Before him, the fire is burned low. Only embers now, glowing faintly red like the hearts of sleeping stars. He looks up, and in his eyes is the reflection of the long road behind us. The jungles of the Maya, the mounds of Cahokia, the terraces of the Inca, the forests, the plains, the ice, all have passed like dreams. But dreams, he says softly, do not die. They drift onward, quietly, beneath the waking world. Before Columbus, before the sails cut the western sea, this land, all of it, was alive, with 1,000 symphonies. Each people had its own rhythm. The slow beat of drums in forest clearings, the whisper of flutes in mountain air, the rustle of maize in the wind, the splash of paddles on mirrored lakes. Together they formed a harmony, a song not of conquest, but of balance, a forgotten symphony. And yet, the storyteller murmurs, no song is ever truly lost. He begins to speak again, his tone steady, like a monk reciting the last line of an old prayer. From the Arctic's frozen breath to the warm jungles of the south, human hands shaped the land with quiet purpose. They built not empires of greed, but homes of faith and rhythm. Te listened, to the stars, to the water. To the wind to age, and through listening, they understood what the world required of them. They learned that to plant was to pray, that to build was to thank, that to die was to return. In the forests, the Haudenosaunee told their children that peace was stronger than anger. In the plains, the Lakota lifted their faces to the sky and spoke to thunder as to a friend. In the high Andes, the Inca offered golden maize to the sun. And in the jungles, the Maya carved their calendars to mark the breath of the heavens. Each believed they were a thread in a vast design, one too grand to see in full, but too sacred to break. The voice lowers, calm and rhythmic. Then came the change. The sails, the smoke, the sound of iron striking stone. The world awoke to a new dawn, and much of what once sang fell silent. The cities faded. The mounds were swallowed by grass. The roads crumbled beneath rain and time. Languages vanished into the dust. But silence, too, can be holy, for in the stillness after a song ends, its echo can still be heard, if one listens carefully enough. Tonight, in the hush of your own room, if you close your eyes, you might hear them. The murmur of the Mississippi beneath Cahokia's mounds, the faint rhythm of a Chasqui's feet along the Inca roads, the laughter of children in a Haudenosaunee longhouse, the call of a crow gliding above the plains. Each sound, a note in that vast forgotten symphony. A reminder that these lands were never empty, never silent, but alive, with meaning. The storyteller leans closer to the fire. His voice softens, almost a whisper. History, he says, is not only what is written, it is what the wind remembers. It is what the rivers whisper to the stones. It is the hum beneath the ground when the world sleeps. He stirs the embers gently with an iron rod. A small flame rises, then fades. So listen not only to words, he says, but to silence. For silence is where memory lives. There is a story, one last one, that the old ones used to tell. They said that when the first people of the Americas came into the world, they did not come as conquerors or wanderers, but as caretakers. They were given the land as a song to tend. Some tended it with rivers, some with fields, some with the fire of mountains. Each played their part. And Togater, for countless centuries, they kept the melody of the earth alive. But time, the patient scribe, wrote new verses, and the song, though changed, continues still. Beneath our cities, beneath our steps, in the hush of night, a soft sigh. The voice slows further, dreamlike. Even now, the mounds of Cahokia stand beneath the stars. The terraces of Machu Picchu still cradle the dawn. The Nazca lines still stretch beneath the desert sky, silent prayers written in dust. The forest still holds the laughter of those who came before. The wind across the plains still carries their words. And the mountains, oh, the mountains, they remember everything. The storyteller closes his eyes. His tone becomes almost like the rustle of leaves. The world before Columbus was not a blank page waiting to be written. It was a library already full, its books made of stone and maize and starlight. And though many of those pages were torn, their scent remains sweet with smoke and memory. He looks up, as if seeing through the veil of centuries. They are not gone, he says. Te are ere. In every breath of wind, in every kernel of corn, in every song sung to the setting sun. And so, dear traveler, as you drift toward sleep, remember that beneath the ground you walk each day lies a world older than kings, gentler than war, and wiser than we yet know. It waits there, beneath soil and root, beneath water and stone, like a heartbeat beneath the silence. The Americas before dawn. Quiet, vast, dreaming still. The fire sinks lower. The storyteller's final words are a whisper, like a prayer. Sleep now, for the story is not ending, it only rests, as the world once rested before the ships came. And when you wake, may you listen as they once did to the stars, to the rivers, to the long, quiet music of the earth. And so ends our story. Dear listener, the fires of the ancient world have burned to embers. The voices of its people fade softly into the wind, and the Americas sleep once more beneath the stars. But though the cities fell silent, their memories still wander through the soil, through rivers that once carried songs, through the gentle hush of night. Thank you for wandering this forgotten road with me tonight. May the quiet of the ancient world linger with you as you drift into dreams. And if you wish to return to listen again to the hum of old time, you are always welcome here, in this calm corner of history. If this story eased your mind, subscribe to Go to Sleep Historian, where the past is not loud or cruel, but slow, kind, and endlessly patient. Good night, sleep well, and may your dreams walk gently among the ruins of time.